this vocabulary of food justice, right? You've spoken about the fact that it shouldn't be controversial, that everyone should have access to food, but the reality is that there are people who don't understand that, that there are some people who don't. And then the idea of um, what's cheap, what's cost effective also comes into play. And when you look at it from the filter of privilege, it's the answer is beans and rice, but reality is the dollar menu is really, really just as cheap or sometimes cheaper than beans and rice. So Naijha, I'm going to move over to you, with the work that you do. Tell me, like, this whole idea around or the insistence that some people have that no, keep it neutral, don't bring racism into this. This is food. This is a food desert, and but it's not food apartheid. And I know that at the Food Empowerment Project, Lauren Ornelas has done a lot of work, and she speaks about these words, and she says food apartheid. Please share with me your reflections, and also through your perspective, as a nonprofit founder, as a business person in Maryland. How are you dealing with this? How is your work dealing with this?
Well, you first started, you said something about the racism impact to it. Well, racism is everywhere, and I was surprised that it was in the vegan movement. Brenda could tell you that, because I was shocked. And then when any parts of it, I'm like, are you kidding me? I thought everyone was compassionate. Even in the restaurant business, where the majority of people that work for us aren't vegan, thought all vegans were compassionate, and that's just not the case. If you're racist, you're not compassionate. I'm sorry. If you're compassionate for the animals or whatever, you're not compassionate. So in our work, we have to be compassionate enough to get this information, get the food, get the events, whether it be by way of festival, by way of a vegan week, by way of table sampling, when COVID wasn't here and when COVID goes away, however we can get to our people with this information and these events, and bridge that gap on their knowledge, and learn that they do have some vegan veg soul in them, and they can be compassionate around animals. They can be compassionate about their eating. They can be compassionate about their spirituality, because again, it's still that foundation. You have to build yourself from within in order to come out and appreciate the information that is being delivered to you. It starts there.
Right. Well, thank you so much.
Can I just say one thing? You were talking about Food Empowerment Project and Lauren Ornelas, and I just wanted to point out that the reason why she feels like we should be using the term food apartheid as opposed to food desert is because deserts are more may be seen as more naturally occurring, right? Like, a desert is a natural biome, as opposed to apartheid, which is something that is imposed on a group of people. And now we know, people who are doing food justice know, food justice work, that the way that the food system is set up in, around people, low-income people of color, is no accident. It's not a natural occurrence. It didn't just happen. It is a series of decisions that were made, oftentimes at the governmental level, oftentimes at the corporate level, that certain people are going to be targeted with the worst possible foods and the cheapest foods that, are imaginable, and the most harmful foods that are imaginable. And that is the system that is in place. And that's why Lauren feels like we shouldn't use that term anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
The intent to do the harm that's being done for a number of reasons, whether it's to test on us medically, which you can see in a hospital state that we're in, all of that.
Well, it's pretty important for a lot of, and especially our viewers out there, to really understand that it's not by default, but it's by decisive design. And there's a distinction between those two, and which is why food apartheid is an example of a vegan intersectional term. It's part of that food vocabulary, food justice vocabulary, or even vegan vocabulary that we ought to understand if we're part of that vegan movement. Talking about compassion, talking about food apartheid, Dr. Dehghan, you're in the UK. And currently, a lot of people, out here stateside, feel that veganism is really stronger in the UK, versus here in the US. What is your view on the food apartheid sorts of systems that you may have seen? You're part of the plant-based health professionals group. As part of your work, how do you see that present, and how do you deal with that?
Well, I think, I like the term actually food apartheid because, as you said, it is by design. And it is really sad because, again, we say rice and beans are cheap, but we don't consider that some people don't even have a kitchen. Erin actually mentioned the social determinants of health. So it is just, the neighborhood they live, what do they have actually access to? Their homes, how big is actually their home? Can they actually, because we say, oh, buy, bulks of this and that. Do they have actually enough space in their place, homes to actually store those things? And I have worked in the community where people didn't have a kitchen. They didn't have enough space because they were sharing, just one room with the whole family. So they couldn't actually go and buy that. They had to go every day and buy something to eat. And yes, it was much easier just to go to a junk food place and have, something cheap, which was tastier. And again, we don't consider the impact of racism and discrimination on stress. It causes stress. And when you are stressed, you want to go for food which comforts you. I know we shouldn't, but how can you tell somebody who is stressed out, who has so many problems, or don't eat that? That is not healthy. You have to offer a healthy solution, which is, it is accessible. They can actually do it. It is easy. Again, we need to put ourselves in their shoes, what they are going through, and how much energy and resources they have, at their hands, and they don't usually. So we have to make it as easy as possible for them.
Right.
So we can't just, throw out these words, oh, this is cheap, buy that and do this. And I think in the UK, we face the same problems. I mean, a lot of people don't actually are not aware that we do have these so-called, food deserts. But, it does exist, but we just hear it, about the US. No, it does exist here as well. So we have the same problems, and unfortunately, it is difficult to tackle. It is really hard.
Exactly. And you said something really important out there, that it's important for us to put ourselves in those persons' shoes. And I was just reading the Distressed Communities Index, which is actually released by an organization called the Economic Innovation Group. And what they do is, at a zip code level in the United States, they have a 6 category, sort of stratification, sort of a system where they say these are zip codes that are distressed, these are zip codes that are at risk zip codes, and then there are prosperous and comfortable zip codes, and so on. And the report goes on to say that 110 million Americans live either in an at-risk zip code or a distressed zip code. And the rest of the population that lives in a prosperous zip code has no idea around how these people live. They have no idea about their world. They have no idea. They, in fact, even consider it too risky for themselves to venture into, those neighborhoods. And that is the level of the divide, that is pervasive. And I'm pretty sure it's not just the US, it's the UK, it's the rest of the world, even, the country that I come in from, there's a huge power distance. So there are places that, so-called wealthy people wouldn't even ever venture because they don't care to look, and therefore they don't know how to provide solutions.